me, I just admire any woman, like Cheryl said, that's juggling both home and office. And we continue to excel in the workplace, especially women in leadership. The one thing that I love about the Disney intern program is that there are young women that are coming into this industry who are eager to learn, and they welcome a female mentor who is or isn't a leader, or in the leadership role, I should say, to guide or or advise them on their career paths. I remember growing up, my dad would always say, sit back and watch the room. Just watch and see how others move. You don't always have to be the first one to speak or say something. When I was younger, I would go, hi, my name is Fiesha. What's your name? And so there are many, I thought about that. And when you ask this question, there are many young women who are watching women in leadership roles and witnessing this female leader complete her task or complete her obstacles time and time again. And they're wondering, I can do that. They're crushing they're looking at the women in leadership crush their goals. And so they're telling themselves, if she can do it, I can do it. Seeing a woman in leadership is inspiring to these interns that come into our newsroom. And seeing women in leadership is also inspiring to women at Disney today. So you never know who's sitting back and watching you and making all the while you're inspiring them to go ahead and step out on faith and make their own moves and accomplish their own goals.
And I would definitely agree with that, because I think that it's fantastic to have younger women able to look up and see someone who looks like them and who can relate to them. But I also think for some of us who've been around for a minute or two, it's great for us to see women in leadership as well, and to see how perhaps the same job that a man held until last year this time or a decade ago, how they do things differently. I won't ever say better. I think mostly it's different. But it is very inspiring for us, for instance, to have a general manager, much like Cheryl, who is a woman, and you feel as though you learn different skills from them. It's not better or worse, but you learn different skills. And Cheryl has certainly addressed that in terms of how a newsroom operates. But I watch the women leaders around me very carefully, because it does help you to improve perhaps what you present to other people.
I love how you're talking about how we can include all layers of ourselves in what we do. And it really brings to mind a question. I see it just came up. Nika is asking this question. For those of you who are moms or caretakers outside of the office, how do you maintain work-life balance and take care of yourself? If I could start with this is a constant question for myself. I have 3 children who have a lot of activities. I have a lot of responsibilities. I pursued my master's degree while I was still working and having kids. And I feel like it's always changing, and I have to be open to the fact that I'm not always going to have the answer. But what I have learned is to have grace with myself and ask others to have grace with me, including my children, that, mommy might get it wrong. I literally took my daughter to the wrong basketball team 2 days ago. Yeah, it was like 7 o'clock at night. She showed up and we're like, oh my goodness, you're not on this team anymore. A little embarrassing. But it's having that grace to say, all right, I messed up, but it's going to be okay. And also knowing when one thing for me, one thing might have to be accelerated a little more while another thing slows down. So riding that gas and brake pedal. Sometimes it's a little bit more that you have to do at work, than other times it's a little more at home. But I'm a little more comfortable now in knowing that I won't always have the answer, and that's okay. How do you all manage being, in a lot of cases, primary caregiver in a job that does not stop? We go 24/7.
I may jump in on this. I don't have children of my own. I've got a couple of nephews, a couple of nieces, but I have to say that my generation of news reporters, when I was kind of getting into the business as a young woman, we were busy being men in skirts. And so we didn't want to, run the risk of having to deal with kids when you wanted to be sent to, Germany on a big story or something like that. So as I look back on it, there are some regrets that I have, and one of them is, would I've been able to kind of balance it? The flip side of that is I have an elderly father. My dad's in his 90s, former pastor. I guess you're never a former pastor, but retired from being a pastor some years ago. And early this year, he was very ill, and he got COVID. We had to put him in the hospital, and he was there for almost 3 weeks. And I just called in and said, I can't make it. I just will not be there until he's better. And it wasn't that long ago that I would not have made that as much of a priority as I need to now. So I'm always so envious of you women who can have 10 balls in the air at the same time, even if it's at the wrong basketball team. But it is so important at some point in your career to recognize that your life is a lot more important than your job and the lives of so many other people. It's a lot easier said than done. And I always look at women like you, TaRhonda, and I think, how can she do all of those things at the same time, get a master's degree and have 3 kids? But as with most women leaders, you look around and you realize that there are a lot of people who are able to do it. And you just have to kind of make it work. And I love the idea of giving yourself grace. I wish I'd learned that skill a lot earlier too, because I'm constantly second guessing myself. But it is, whether it's your parents, your kids, your best friend, your dog, whatever, at some point in your life, you have to recognize there will always be disasters, but you don't always have the opportunity to be there and really advance that relationship, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like, I'll jump in there too. Look, I think that everybody agrees with this idea of giving yourself a little grace. I'm not sure that it actually is possible to find true work-life balance, especially if you're in news. The news gods wait for no one. And when things happen, you have to respond. And depending on what your job is, you may not have a choice about whether you pick your family over the news event of the moment. And my children, who are now adults, always talk about how they had a different upbringing as news kids, they called themselves. And we always used to say when everybody else's parents were coming home, their parents were leaving to go respond to whatever the crisis of the moment was. And that was how they grew up. And my way of explaining how you manage this is, as long as your kids know that you love them and that you're there for them as much as you possibly can be, and for those really important moments, and we all know what they are, they have to learn to understand how important this work is to you. And that there are going to be times where you are going to choose the work over them because that's the most important thing at that moment. And they have to learn how to process that and be part of that. And I actually think it helped me to raise very strong. I have 2 daughters who are those people who know them. They're very strong. They're very independent. And I think that was part of what they learned growing up because of that.
Yeah, and my daughters watch and learn and love too when mom's really doing her thing. Like, it might mean I can't make it to every activity, but they're proud of me. But they also know when it snows, I'm not going to be home making snowmen with you. I'm going to go in early and work late, and that's what I do. So kids, forgive, because this is a really popular question, because someone else is asking, how do you face the guilt though of not being with your kids? And I think, Cheryl, you touched on that, saying that your kids love you, they forgive you, and they can see what you're doing. And it's not just for your career, it's for your entire family that you're doing this.
You're doing work for the community, you're doing work that matters, that's important. And if you find yourself feeling guilty about it, that's where you allow yourself some grace.
Exactly.
That's
Fiesha,
really
do you have that experience, Fiesha?
I have that experience all the time, both because both of my children are in sports and they're different ages. So it's not easy at all. And sometimes I just feel like if I'm not letting this one down, I'm letting this one down, or I'm letting someone at work down. So it's frustrating. And I'm in agreement. You do have to give yourself some grace. And I just like, excuse me, I just tell them every day, I love you. This is for us, you know. and I
Yeah.
try to be present, when I can. Boundaries and time management also though.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I'm practicing that. I'm trying to get that going in 2024 and balancing my home work life balance and trying leaving on time and making maybe the ending of the game. I wasn't there at the beginning, but here I am now. So it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
And it seems like everyone wins a little bit. So
Exactly. You're giving something to everyone. I once heard someone say too, there's no such thing as work-life balance. It's a work-life mix. You're
yeah,
mixing it all and somehow it's going to work together. When
right.
you're, whether it's family or activities, things in the community, all of that then too goes back to we're still working in a very high demand career. And like any career, you want to work your way up. So what's your advice to someone who might feel frustrated, a woman who might feel frustrated about her career trajectory and maybe not knowing how to get to where she wants to be? What's your advice to a woman who's facing that?
So I have a couple of suggestions here. For one, let somebody know what you want. Really tell your bosses what your goals are. Talk to your bosses. Let them understand what you want, and then show them that you're capable of it. I always like to say when we hire someone for a job, we're really not hiring them for the job that's open. We're hiring them for the next job, because you want to hire somebody who is going to be able to grow and develop and advance. So make decisions, take actions in your normal job that show them you're thinking about that next step. You're thinking about how to get to where you want to go. Show them you're thinking like that next job. So um, if you're a producer and you want to be an executive producer, when you're making decisions during the day, think about what, if I were the executive producer, how would I be handling the situation? What would I be suggesting? And make that suggestion. And let them see that you can be kind of a bigger thinker.
Yeah.
And not just focused on the task at hand.
That's amazing advice.
That's very good advice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Fiesha or Melanie, this rolls into another question about have you faced any roadblocks in your career and how did you navigate around those? We're talking about career trajectory.
Fiesha, you want to go first?
I don't, you know what, honestly, I don't think I've encountered any roadblocks, at least that I've noticed. You know, I would say I
Yeah, and that's a great thing. That's
I mean I
exactly
don't
the thing.
not I mean not that I can't, if I did I can't remember them. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like I just
you're
think that
busy
it's
putting
all
in
a
the work.
matter of figuring it out and making sacrifices, and it's a work in progress for sure, but I don't think that my only roadblock would probably be trying to make it work, the
Yeah.
home life mix
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
sacrifices that we make. But
Melanie?
no.
Well, and while I wouldn't say there are any obvious roadblocks, obviously over the years you've had to learn how to speak up in meetings, for instance. There was a time when I felt as though if I make a suggestion, and every woman has felt this at some point or another, if I make a suggestion in the room full of largely male counterparts, nobody's listening. The guy next to me can say the exact same thing 2 minutes from now, and it's genius. And we run off and do it as though it were his idea. So I don't necessarily know that that's a roadblock in my career. I think it's something that virtually every woman in the workplace has faced at one point or another, including now when there are so many women in the newsroom. You still hear that conversation sometimes. I think, and Fiesha, you may have said this, that you spend a lot more time listening and not always talking, which is something those of us who are on the air probably suffer from. It was pretty funny, TaRhonda, when you talked about what inspired you about getting into the business. And I always tell kids, especially if you like reading and writing and you're nosy, this is the place for you. But sometimes you have to also be able to shut up and listen and figure out what the next step may be. And so sometimes I think the roadblocks are self-made, and other times you just have to figure out, okay, if they're not listening to my idea this time, let me figure out a way around it and get into the next place where I want to be. But I can't say anything super horrific has happened over the years. But again, it's sort of that double-edged sword again, being both a Black female. You kind of go, did they not like that idea because of me, or because, I just wasn't in the right flow at that moment?
Yeah. And I've experienced that same thing, like working in environments where you're going, wait, why am I being looked at differently as a Black woman? For instance, I can remember, being in one newsroom where a white male colleague would regularly curse out other people in the newsroom, whether that's a producer or another reporter. And that's just the way that person is. I, though, got called, scary or intimidating for looking at my watch during a meeting because I knew I needed to get out of there. So those types of things where I'm wondering, well, how do I navigate this without coming off as something that I'm not, but while still feeling like I can express myself? I also worked at a time, you would share this with me, Melanie, but I don't know if it's at the same station, but at some stations that I was at, where I was the only Black woman because in their minds, there could only be one at the time, or they only had to have one. So that created everything from, that paranoia about how am I being perceived to competition, or whether it be perceived or real, if there was another Black woman in the environment, and learning how to go against that and instead support each other instead of competing with each other. That was something that I really had to navigate and learn and become, because it wasn't my initial experience. So working around that has really been a learning experience, and is the reason why now I try to make sure that I welcome other women into the fold, because I don't want them to feel like it's a competition. I should say, when I got here, that's the experience that I received. Women were so welcoming and amazing that I was taken aback, because it just was not what I've become accustomed to, which is a shame. So we have to all continue that going.
And we all certainly know that angry Black woman facade that you were painted with.
Exactly. And it was a trying to educate to the person who made that assumption and say, hey, here's the stereotype that you just fed into. And this is why I think it's not fair, without actually becoming angry. Try doing that. Do any of you think ageism is an issue still for women in news?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I feel pretty blessed that here at this station, I've not had to suffer from that as much. But I do think ageism is certainly a real thing, just like I think sexism still exists out there. I find that these days I spend a lot less time worrying about being glamorous like I used to, and a lot more time worrying about my gravitas, and am I able to bring the proper amount of seriousness and weight to stories that are important to me. There are things that I cover now that I would never have considered some years ago. And so you certainly grow into the role. But yeah, there are times when you still look around and you go, now that guy over there is able to be 110 in the newsroom and nobody seems to worry about it, but they treat, some of the women a little bit differently. But I will say I've been very blessed to work in a place where I feel valued for the most part.
Yeah, that's amazing. I remember my daughter asked me one time when she was really little, Mama, why don't I see any women with gray hair on the news? And I just had to stop and look back, and I went, oh my goodness, she's right. She was like 8. And I think we are more valued for who we are rather than how old we are, more so than ever. But I think we have to continue to work at that and see, like, will any of us be able to be silver haired on the air? That would be nice if we could do that one day. But I think that there's been progress too, because I have a friend who got a job, it was a few years ago, in a top market, and she just was convinced, I won't get anything. No one will look at me because I'm 40. And she was wrong. She was hired, and she's fantastic and phenomenal at her job. And that really just gave me so much just hope and inspiration that, hey, we don't have an expiration date when it comes to our abilities in news.
Well, I think that goes back to women leading too. I think Cheryl will look at somebody very differently than
Yeah.
perhaps her male counterpart of it. And hopefully that's changing a whole lot because we are sort of intermixed there. But I do think that that has a lot more to do with women who see the whole you.
Yeah, Cheryl, can you talk a little bit more about that, about women in leadership positions and the difference it makes? And also one person is asking, how can we improve female representation in the managerial ranks?
So in terms of women seeing other women differently in the workplace when it comes to the ageism thing, I do think that is true. It's funny because every once in a while, an anchor who has worked for me has come to me and said, oh, I'm going to have to do this or that and keep my looks. And I look at them, I said, have I said anything? Did I tell you to do anything? No. I said, then why are you even thinking about this?
Mm.
I said, I am of a certain age. I said, I'm looking at you through my lens, right? I said, I see a capable, experienced person who has a lot to offer here, right? That's how you need to think of yourself at this point. And as far as getting more female representation, one, I think we've made huge strides over the last 20 years, especially, and really accelerated that dramatically in the last 10 to 15 years. It ultimately starts with who you're hiring for the entry-level positions and who you're hiring to write and who you're hiring to produce and who you're hiring and bringing up through your system. So there has to be a commitment to that early in the process. I mean, I wouldn't be where I am today if someone didn't see that value in me many, many years ago. And interestingly, in my case, it was an all-male management team that I came to work for at WPVI, who was unbelievably fabulous to me. I came from a station where I found out years later the reason I had gotten hired, I thought they thought I was brilliant and a great writer and all of those things. I'd gotten hired because somebody thought I was a woman who wouldn't make any trouble.
Oh, wow.
They discovered quickly they had made a mistake in that area. But then I went to work at PVI, where you talk about women, men in skirts. I was one of the guys. I was treated as one of the guys, and I actually welcomed that. I felt like I was on an even playing field. I felt like I was being treated equally, that I had equal opportunity. And that inspired me to try harder and harder. And I think you have to look at who you're bringing in and grow them. And so if you want a management team that is reflective of your market, which is what I think you should have, you want to have a management team that looks like the people we serve and understands the people that we serve. You have to hire people who are reflective of your market early on and grow them.
That's
And
big. Yeah, that's
that's
really
what we
big.
do.
That's one of the things that stations are getting right, the ones that are doing that. What other things do you think we're getting right when it comes to representation of women in journalism? Fiesha, what are you seeing? What do you think is being done right?
Um, well, I'm when I started, I was young, and I'm in agreement with Cheryl when she says to start them young and then to teach them and show them. My work ethic has definitely changed since I started, and I honestly feel as though I'm still learning. I'm still learning. This panel is, even though I'm on the panel, I am learning so much, you know. And um, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
I get what you're saying. Yeah, I really do. Where you're part of what
I'm part of
essentially.
what it is that Cheryl is saying in hiring women or hiring people that represent your market. And
Mhm.
so I see that in our leadership team. I see that in our leadership team here at WLS. We have our news director, Jennifer Graves, who has been here for 32 years. We have our assistant news director, Naka, who is a female. She's representing our market, our community. Our director of design is Lisa. Our operations, what is she? Our media operations manager, Natalie. Our building manager, Carmen. I'm surrounded by so many profound women that are in leadership roles here at WLS that it's a it's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity to learn, not only just from my point of view, but from others in other areas within the building. So we've come a long way. We're respected. We're sitting at the heads of tables. We're making decisions that continue to pave the way for those young women that are coming right behind us. So it's inspiring in all of it.
And Neka's commented, of course, you too, Fi. You're one of those amazing women.
Oh,
Melanie, what do you see that's being done right?
I think as I look around, and certainly as I'm listening to her name off some of their managers, at this point, many of our managers in the newsroom and certainly down the hall are women. And so you have this wonderful example of how to accomplish and how to work with other people at that level, at the management level. I also think that many of the hires that we make are so extraordinary now. It used to be, whether we gave ourselves a break or not about it, that there was a lot more to the looks and a lot less to the substance. And that is definitely not the case anymore. I look at so many of the young women that have been hired in the newsroom over the last period of time. And they are not only lovely people, great mothers and wives, but they're brilliant reporters, they're hardworking. And I look at them and I think, wow, I'm so proud of the people that they have become and the way our business has changed so that they are out there and they are available. I mean, you go to certainly some of the national conventions. When I go to the National Association of Black Journalists, I'm just blown away by some of the people that I meet there, and certainly some of the young women. I think they're a lot more sure-footed than we were at one point. I think they know their strengths a lot better. And I love the idea that you're working with other women. You're not trying to elbow them out of the way so you can be the only one in the room, whatever that means. So I'm just really encouraged by the caliber of people that we work with now. And so many of them are women who have made their way up the chain of command or up the ladder without leaving bodies in their wake. Because we've certainly seen that, and not only among the newsroom in general, but often among women, and I don't see very much of that anymore. That's thankfully amazing.
Yeah, the change that I've seen, like some of it, it's I think my role is one of the changes I've seen, because I cover race and culture, and that includes women's issues, people with disabilities, different ages, veterans, like people of all cultures. And those are things that, like, I remember some of these stories I said, I would only get to do these in February at other places that I work. And now the fact that we are covering all of these stories and issues and people as a priority. I've never seen that before. And I've never seen like the fact that we're open to talking about so much. Last year, almost about a year ago, it was unexpected that I shared my journey on social media dealing with fibroids. And I thought, nobody really wants to hear this, but I'm just, letting everyone know because I'm going to be off the air for a few months. And the station and everyone really embraced that and embraced that people wanted to talk about it. And I never, ever thought, like, I was reluctant to even say fibroids. And here we are looking at it like, oh, this is an actual issue that we can talk about, that people need to know about. And we're going to give you a platform to try to help other people. So I'd never experienced anything like that. So I think it's fantastic that we can talk about so many different things now. We have time for a few more questions. And I see one this is a little, I don't know, I hesitate to ask myself questions like this, but the person who typed it in, they're anonymous, but they say, looking back over your long and amazing careers, is there anything you wish you'd done differently? That can be a really tricky question, a slippery slope. And I'll combine it with something else that we were going to talk about, which is what would you tell your younger self? So if you want to tackle one or the other, if I can start, I can't say differently, because one little change would basically not put me where I am right now. And where I am right now is where I believe I'm supposed to be. So I wouldn't do anything differently on that level. But if I could tell my younger self something, I would tell my younger self, don't have one definition of success. Because for so long, especially in this business, I thought of one thing and one thing only when it came to this is going to mark that you've made it. And that was wrong. No, not wrong, but it needed to be adjusted to meet how I grow as a person and how I can meet the opportunities that came to me. So that's been very recent where I've had to figure out that my definition of success was too limited. And also, I'm going to echo something, Melanie, you said earlier, which is you are more than what you do. You are more than your job. And there's so much to, there's so many layers to all of us that all of them have to be fed. So don't have that one definition and don't think you're only one thing. Who wants to add to that? You know, what you would tell your younger self, or if there's anything you would change?
I would probably say trust yourself, because there's so many times, and I've told you how often I second guess myself. There's so many times when I want to do a story and everybody else kind of turns their nose up at it. And then eventually I talk my way into it and it turns out to be really interesting. Your five boy story is a perfect example. I did one on people over the age of 100, and including a woman now who is 114 and the oldest person in the country, who lives not that far away from us here at the station. But there were so many times when I would come in, and because I was the only fill in the blank Black person in the room, woman in the room, college graduate, whatever it was, I would think, oh, well, I just don't know what's happening. And I wouldn't push. So I think that, as I said, the young women that I look at now are far more self-confident in so many ways. I love the idea that everybody goes to the gym all the time and that they have all of these interesting hobbies and things. But I think I would tell my younger self, hey, you got it going on. Trust yourself a little bit more. I have a similar situation to what happened to you. I have MS, and I've had it for multiple sclerosis. I should spell it out. And I've had it for now probably close to 30 years. And for the longest, I spent a lot of time trying to hide that or trying to figure out ways to get around it. And as I look back on it, I realized that my coming out as it was, really helped a lot of other people. And that's a situation where, again, had I just trusted myself right up front, I might have done it differently. But other than that, I don't have a lot of regrets.
Nice. Cheryl or Fiesha?
Fiesha, you want to go?
Okay. I would say to control your own destiny or someone else will. Be assertive, know your worth, and speak up for what you want. Speak up for what you want. I know sometimes some people don't want to have difficult conversations. Don't be afraid to have those difficult conversations. What you may think is small, no, what they may think is small, you may think is is a big deal. So have those, speak up and have those difficult conversations. What I would tell my younger self.
So what I think I would tell everybody, maybe sounds surprising, these are just jobs. They're just jobs. Remind yourself all the time they are just jobs. The much more important piece of this are the people that you meet, the relationships you develop over all these years that you do this. Those are going to be the things that are most meaningful to you as you make your journey. Those people that you meet early in your career are going to be your lifelong friends as you make this journey through this business. The people you meet along the way are the people you learn from. How you are treated by those people that you meet may determine how you treat others on the journey. It's so much more about that personal contact than it is about any job that you have. And I think what I would have told my younger self is stop worrying so much. I worried about everything. everything.
Yes.
I worried
You and
about
I have
work,
that
I
in
worried
common.
about home, I worried about everything. And the advice I got from somebody many, many years ago that really has become the watchword for me is, if it's not going to be important in 5 years, then it's not really important.
Yeah.
And so anything you get upset about at work, if it's not going to be a big deal still in 5 years, then let it go and focus on the stuff that is going to be big in 5 years.
Save yourself the stress, you know. Look, we have to wrap up in a second. I'm sorry we can't get to all the questions that we have, but one more thing, because there's so many women who are asking the questions, who are looking for that inspiration, that motivation, and they're getting it. But I want to know, what is your challenge to the women in news now moving forward? And I use that word strategically, challenge. And if I can start, I would say my challenge is to be fearless, to do what we have done, but take it so much further, because I really want to see what's possible. I think as much as we've achieved now, there's so much more that's out there coming from that new generation who really has that spunk and that fire, and doesn't know a lot of the boundaries that we were taught. So what are your challenges to the next generation of women in news?
I'll take that one. My challenge is to make sure you bring others with you. It's never a journey you go on by yourself.
I'm in agreement with that, Cheryl. I'm so in agreement with that. I mean, I know I've said this several times, but I wouldn't be here if no one didn't reach back for me to make sure that I was brought along towards the ending of her journey. Really, I really wouldn't have been. So,
Melanie?
Well, that's definitely my mantra. There were a lot of people who helped me, and the best you can do is always reach, whether it's reach back or reach to either side and bring somebody along. I also loved your idea about the fact that success may not look like what you think it is, and to acknowledge that, you know, perhaps you start off here and then you end up someplace else that's totally different. So maybe be open to a lot of different things. Don't box yourself into one area, but really be open, because you never know what is going to be the perfect fit for you. And then maybe in a couple of years later, that's not the perfect fit. Maybe you go on to something else. But I definitely think that working together is what represents the best of women in management and in the newsroom. And that's something we should all work on.
Absolutely. And collaborating with you all today has just been a joy for me, and I've learned so much. And I'm going to need a book from all three of you, because I'm sitting here taking notes while I'm in the panel, because it was such a great discussion. So thank you, Cheryl Fair, Fiesha Burge, Melanie Lawson. We really appreciate you being a part of this panel celebrating Women's History Month. And to everyone who is here, thank you all for your support, for your questions. We hope you take this inspiring message, all the advice, and take it out into the world and do great things. So hey, we'll have you on the panel in a few years. Everybody have a great day. Thank you. Goodbye.
you, everyone.